Kythara hadn't spoken in 3 solar cycles. Let that sink in. The most vicious predators in known space, creatures who turned entire star systems into graveyards, who made civilizations vanish overnight, went completely silent. Their war fleets, scattered across 17 sectors, simply stopped. The Galactic Council thought it was a trap. Admiral Zexhai of the Confederation. Navy called it the calm before annihilation. Military analysts predicted the Kythara were preparing their final, devastating assault on the core worlds. They were all wrong. What happened wasn't an ending. It was a revelation that would shatter everything. The galaxy thought it knew about terror, about survival, about what it truly means to be Apex. It began with a single transmission from the outer rim, coordinates to a dead system called Sol, a system the Kythara had marked for conquest, a system that should have been nothing but ash and screaming. But when the first scout ships arrived, they found something impossible. The third planet, a toxic death world of crushing gravity, corrosive atmosphere, and endless natural disasters, was thriving. Not with Kythara colonies, but with something else entirely. Something that would teach the galaxy's apex predators the difference between being feared and being humbled. This is the story of why the Kythara went silent, why the most feared Deathworlders in existence suddenly stopped their centuries-long campaign of conquest, and why, when they finally spoke again, it was to issue something they had never given before. A warning. If you want to understand how a single species rewrote the rules of survival in the galaxy, hit that subscribe button and let's dive into the most shocking encounter in cosmic history. To understand what happened at Sol, you need to understand what the Kythara were. For 1,200 years, they had been the undisputed apex of the galaxy. 8 feet of scaled muscle, razor claws that could slice through starship hull plating, and a predatory intelligence that made them perfect killing machines. They didn't just conquer worlds, they consumed them, leaving behind nothing but barren rock and the echoing screams of the fallen. Their homeworld, Kythara Prime, was a testament to evolutionary brutality. Gravity 3 times Earth standard, atmospheric pressure that would crush most species instantly, temperatures that swung from molten hellfire to absolute zero within hours. It was a world that didn't just kill the weak, it devoured them. And from this forge of endless suffering, the Kythara emerged as the perfect predators. They had conquered 47 star systems, enslaved 63 species. Their war fleets were legends of terror, massive, dreadnoughts shaped like the claws of their creators, bristling with weapons that could crack planets. When the Kythara arrived in a system, civilizations had 3 options: flee, submit, or die. Most chose to die fighting. It was considered more honorable than what came after surrender. But then came the expansion toward the outer rim. The Kythara had identified a cluster of systems, ripe for conquest, primitive worlds orbiting young stars, far from the established powers that might mount organized resistance. Easy pickings. The survey teams reported something interesting about one particular system. The third planet was a death world. Not just difficult, genuinely hostile to life. Seismic activity that could level mountains overnight. Weather patterns that included rotating windstorms visible from orbit. Oceans so violent they could swallow islands whole. The Kythara were intrigued. It had been centuries since they'd found a world that might actually challenge them. Their forward scouts painted a picture that seemed almost too good to be true. A planet so hostile that only the strongest could survive there. Perfect hunting grounds. What the scouts didn't mention, what they couldn't have known, was that this death world wasn't empty. It was inhabited by something that had not only survived its brutal environment, but had actually thrived in it. The initial reconnaissance was routine. Standard Kythara protocol. Establish orbital superiority. Scan for major population centers. Identify the strongest specimens for capture and study. Then begin systematic elimination of the rest. The first surprise came when their sensors detected massive energy signatures across the planet. Not the scattered campfires of primitives, but coordinated industrial complexes. Cities that stretched for hundreds of kilometers. Transportation networks that spanned continents. This wasn't a primitive world. It was an advanced civilization that had somehow flourished on a death world. Fleet Commander Thexal was not concerned. Advance meant better prey. Civilized species often fought harder, lasted longer. They provided more entertainment before they inevitably fell. The second surprise came when they tried to establish communication. The planet's inhabitants responded immediately, not with surrender, Not with pleas for mercy, but with questions. They wanted to know who the Kythara were, where they came from. What they wanted, as if they had never heard of the galaxy's apex predators, as if the name Kythara didn't immediately inspire the appropriate level of terror and submission. But the third surprise, the one that would change everything, came when the humans introduced themselves. Humans. That's what they called themselves. The inhabitants of this impossible death world called themselves humans. And when Fleet Commander Thexal delivered the standard ultimatum, surrender or face annihilation, the human response was unlike anything in Kythara history. They laughed. Not the bitter laugh of despair, not the hysterical laugh of madness, the genuine, almost fond laugh of someone hearing an excellent joke. And then, before Thexal could process this unprecedented reaction, the humans made a counteroffer that would echo through galactic history. They invited Kythara down for coffee. What happened next would challenge everything the galaxy thought. It knew about strength, survival, and what it truly means to be apex. Keep watching to discover the encounter that left the most feared predators in space speechless. Fleet Commander Thexal had faced down the desperate last stands of dying civilizations. He had heard every possible response to Kythara ultimatums, screams, pleas, defiant last words, even silence. But he had never, in 8 centuries of conquest, heard laughter. And he had definitely never been invited to share a beverage. The human transmission continued. Broadcast from what appeared to be their capital city, a sprawling metropolis that somehow thrived despite being built directly on top of a tectonic fault line. We realized this might be a bit unconventional. The human representative continued. But we've found that most misunderstandings can be cleared up over a good cup of coffee. We've got some excellent Colombian roast, and we'd love to learn more about your people. Thexal's tactical officers exchanged glances. In all their battle simulations, in all their conquest protocols, there was no procedure for this scenario. The humans weren't surrendering. They weren't fighting. They were hosting. Perhaps they don't understand the situation, suggested Sub-Commander Vextar, his claws unconsciously extending and retracting, a nervous habit he'd developed during particularly confusing tactical scenarios. Shall we provide a demonstration of our capabilities? Thexal considered this. A demonstration was standard protocol when dealing with species too primitive to understand the futility of resistance. A precisely targeted strike, perhaps one of their smaller cities. Something impressive but not wasteful. But something about the human response nagged at him. The tone wasn't ignorant. It was confident, as if they knew exactly who they were dealing with and simply didn't care. Sir, interrupted Communications Officer Kraleth, we're receiving another transmission from the surface. Multiple sources this time. The main view screen, filled with dozens of different human faces, different skin tones, different languages being translated in real time, but all sharing that same inexplicable expression of genuine curiosity and welcome. We've prepared landing coordinates, said a human who identified herself as Dr. Sarah Chen, speaking from what appeared to be some kind of research facility. We thought you might be interested in seeing how we've adapted to our world's unique challenges. Another human, this one wearing what appeared to be ceremonial military dress, added, we've been wondering when we'd finally meet other species who chose to make Deathworlds their home. We have so much to compare notes about. Chose to make Deathworlds their home? Thexal felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries. Uncertainty. The humans were speaking as if living on this hostile planet was a deliberate decision, not an evolutionary accident or a punishment. Sir, Vextar said quietly, perhaps we should scan their military capabilities more thoroughly before proceeding. The scan results. That came back defied explanation. The humans had no orbital defenses, no planet-cracking weapons, no fleet of any significant size. Their most powerful weapons were primitive projectile systems and crude explosive devices that wouldn't even scratch. Kythara battle armor. By every tactical assessment, they were completely defenseless. And yet, they had somehow thrived on a world that made Kythara Prime look hospitable. Fleet Commander, said Science Officer Morketh, reviewing the planetary analysis, I'm reading some unusual data from the surface. Perhaps we should investigate these anomalies before proceeding with standard conquest protocols. The anomalies were everywhere. Massive structures built directly in the paths of seasonal storm systems, cities that had been repeatedly destroyed by natural disasters, only to be rebuilt bigger and stronger. Transportation networks that somehow functioned, despite regular seismic activity, that would level most civilizations' infrastructure. Most puzzling of all were the recreational facilities. The humans appeared to have built elaborate structures, specifically for the purpose of voluntarily exposing themselves to danger. They called them theme parks and extreme sports venues. They were actively seeking out additional ways to risk their lives for fun. "Sir," Vextar said slowly, "I'm beginning to think we may have underestimated this species." That's when the first human delegation launched. It wasn't a military vessel. It wasn't even armed. It was a small, primitive craft that somehow managed to achieve orbit using what appeared to be controlled explosions. The same technology they used for their recreational fireworks. And aboard that impossible little ship were 3 humans who had voluntarily strapped themselves to barely contained explosives just to come say hello in person. When they docked with the Kythara flagship, uninvited and apparently unconcerned about the massive weapons arrays pointed at them, Fleet Commander Thexal made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his very long life. He agreed to meet them. The humans who stepped aboard the most feared dreadnought in the galaxy were unremarkable by galactic standards. Small, soft, with no natural weapons or armor. They should have been paralyzed with terror in the presence of apex predators. Instead, the first human, who introduced himself as Captain James Rodriguez, looked around the bridge with genuine fascination and said, "Wow, this is incredible engineering. How do you manage the structural integrity under acceleration?" "We've been struggling with that problem ourselves." And then he offered Thexal a small container filled with a dark, aromatic liquid. "As promised," Rodriguez said with a smile. "Colombian roast. Fair trade, sustainably sourced. We thought you might enjoy trying something from our world." That's when Thexal realized that everything the Kythara thought they knew about survival, about strength, about what it meant to be apex, was about to be challenged by 3 soft, small, impossibly brave creatures who had traveled through the void just to share coffee with monsters. What happened during that unprecedented meeting would redefine the very concept of apex predator. Keep watching to discover the moment that changed the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The moment Fleet Commander Thexal tasted human coffee, 8 centuries of conquest came to an abrupt halt. Not because of the coffee, though he had to admit. It was remarkably complex for a beverage made from ground plant matter. No, what stopped him cold was what Captain Rodriguez said next. "We heard about your expansion campaigns," Rodriguez mentioned casually, as if discussing the weather. 47 star systems in 1,200 years. That's impressive efficiency. We've only been spacefaring for about 70 years, but we've colonized our entire solar system in that time. Thexal's battle-hardened mind processed this information slowly. Humans had achieved in 70 years what most species took millennia to accomplish. On their own, without conquest, without slaves. How? He found himself asking the first question he had posed to a potential conquest species in over 2 centuries. Rodriguez smiled. "Want to see?" What followed was a tour that would fundamentally alter the Kythara understanding of what it meant to survive. The humans didn't just live on their death world. They had turned its hostility into strength. Their cities weren't built to hide from earthquakes. They were built to dance with them. Structures that swayed and flexed and grew stronger with each tremor. "We learned early that fighting our world was pointless," explained Dr. Chen as she showed them through a facility that harvested energy from volcanic activity. "So we learned to partner with it instead." Partner with it. The concept was revolutionary to a species that had spent millennia conquering everything in their path. The humans showed them vertical farms that turned hurricane winds into power sources. Cities that used tsunami channels as transportation networks. Structures that not only survived meteor impacts but converted the kinetic energy into useful power. But the real revelation came when they reached the memorial site. It was a simple stone wall carved with billions of names. Names of humans who had died learning to survive on their impossible world. Names of those who had sacrificed themselves so their species could grow stronger. "Every name here represents someone who tried something new," Rodriguez said quietly. "Someone who pushed the boundaries of what we thought was possible. They failed so we could succeed." Thexal stared at the wall, a monument not to conquest, but to learning. to growth through loss rather than dominance through violence. You honor your failures, he asked. We honor their courage, Dr. Chen replied. Every failure taught us something about survival, about adaptation, about becoming stronger not by destroying others, but by becoming more than we were. That's when the third member of the human delegation spoke up, Commander Elena Vasquez, a woman whose calm demeanor hadn't changed even when surrounded by the galaxy's most feared predators. Fleet Commander, she said, we've been monitoring your fleet's communications. We know you're here to conquer our world, and we wanted to make you an offer. Thexal's claws automatically extended, a defensive reflex triggered by the unexpected shift in conversation. We challenge you, Vasquez continued calmly, to a contest of survival, not a battle. Not a war, a contest. Choose your best warriors, she said. We'll choose ours. We'll take them to the most hostile environments on both our worlds. Whoever survives longest wins. Thexal felt something he hadn't experienced since his youth on Kythara. Prime the thrill of facing a genuine challenge. And if we win, he asked, then Earth is yours. Rodriguez replied simply, but if we win, you leave our system in peace. And maybe, just maybe, you consider that there might be other ways to grow strong. The contest lasted 72 hours. Thexal sent his finest warriors, veterans of 100 campaigns, survivors of the most brutal training regimens in galactic history, creatures who had faced down armies and lived to tell the tale. The humans sent a school teacher, a park ranger, and a search and rescue volunteer. The Kythara warriors were magnificent. They faced down volcanic eruptions with tactical precision. They navigated hurricane force, winds using their superior strength and natural armor. They even managed to survive the crushing depths of Earth's oceans for several hours. But the humans didn't just survive, they thrived. The school teacher, Dr. Amanda Liu, turned a volcanic cave system into a functional shelter, complete with water purification and food cultivation. The park ranger, Jake Standing Bear, used hurricane winds to power a communications array that kept the team in constant contact with the base. The search and rescue volunteer, Maria Santos, not only survived the ocean depths, but managed to rescue 2 Kythara warriors who had gotten into difficulty. Rescued them, not defeated them. Rescued them. When the contest ended, Thexal stood on the surface of humanity's impossible deathworld and felt something break inside, his mind the absolute certainty. That strength meant dominance. That survival meant conquest. How? He whispered to Captain Rodriguez as they watched the sunrise. Paint the sky in colors that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. Rodriguez considered the question carefully, then pointed to a group of human children playing in what appeared to be a controlled avalanche zone. We don't survive our world, he said finally. We live with it, we adapt to it. We become partners with forces that could destroy us, and in doing so, we become something stronger than we ever could have been alone. That night, Fleet Commander Thexal sent a message to Kythara High Command that would echo through history. Conquest of Sol system suspended indefinitely. Recommend immediate cessation of all expansion activities. Have encountered species that redefine apex survival. Require time to reassess. Today, 5 standard years after the Great Silence, the galaxy is a different place. The Kythara have become the premier experts in extreme environment adaptation, sharing their knowledge freely with any species facing survival challenges. And at the center of it all, on their impossible death world, humans continue to push the boundaries of what it means to thrive in harmony with forces that could destroy them. They still invite visitors for coffee. Fleet Commander Thexal, now Ambassador Thexal, visits Earth regularly. He's developed quite a taste for Colombian roast, the galaxy's most feared. Deathworlders went silent because they learned the most important lesson in the universe. True apex strength isn't about being the most dangerous predator. It's about being the most adaptable partner. If this story of cosmic transformation gave you chills, you won't want to miss our next video about the human colony ship that taught an entire galactic federation the meaning of hope. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because the universe is full of stories about humanity's incredible impact on the cosmos, and we're just getting started. What other human achievements do you think would shock alien civilizations? Let us know in the comments below.